Warning: the following interview features an anonymous individual whose voice has been altered to protect their identity. Certain names and details have been omitted to maintain their confidentiality. The following views and opinions expressed are their own and do not reflect the opinions of From Another or the Vintage News.
So are you at liberty to tell?
Well, it wasn't uncommon for individuals who were unsupervised to take those items.
Entire donations?
Yes.
Bags full? Welcome back to the Vintage News. I'm Tom Hoover, and today we have a very special report for you. Today we have an exclusive interview with an ex-employee of one of the largest non-profit organizations that sells donated secondhand goods. We're gonna get into the real nitty-gritty and expose some secrets that you're definitely gonna want to hear. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So, thank you for being with us today.
No problem.
So we're going to start off easy. We want to know, where do the items come from at this donation center?
All items are donated by individuals who want to support the cause. So could come from a large organization such as Winners, trying to get rid of some stuff. Could come from Barb down the street. But wherever they're getting their stuff, they're getting it for free.
And what's the pipeline from donated item to store to outlet store to going on further?
There's a couple different pipelines, I think. I mean, if you have shopped at one of the outlet centers of this particular nonprofit organization, you might notice goods that you wouldn't normally see on the retail floor. So when donation attendees receive items that aren't eligible to be put on the sales floor, they would go directly to the outlet.
And what determines where each item goes?
Well, I mean, how yellow is the pillow, right? How vintage is the shirt? Some of these people don't really know that this stuff is work money, right? Maybe it's dirty, but they have very clear guidelines supplied by upper management in order to make the discretion of whether it's deemed eligible to people on the sales floor or not. So that being said, we're only human. Mistakes are made, people make mistakes, and sometimes stuff goes to the outlet that shouldn't. And sometimes stuff goes on the sales floor in stores that shouldn't. Most of the stuff that you'll see has been on the sales floor at retail locations for an extended period of time, and it wasn't able to sell. And then that's when it ends up being sent to the donation center, the outlet center.
A huge rumor is that all the good stuff is taken before it hits the floor. In your opinion, is this true?
100%. I mean, if there's an individual who maybe he's a big fan of old cartoons. I don't know how many Looney Tunes shirts you got on the floor, but there would be nothing stopping him or her from stealing that item if he or she was unsupervised.
Right.
So, to answer your question, 100% yes.
So another way that these organizations get donations is a clothing drive or donation drive. Did you have any experience with those sorts of events?
I personally never had any experience with those types of events, but I did hear some stories.
What kind of stories are you at liberty to tell?
Well, it wasn't uncommon for individuals who were unsupervised to take those items.
Entire donations?
Yes.
Bags full?
It could have been. It could have been bags. It could have been one item in particular. Maybe someone left their wedding ring in the jacket. Maybe that jacket had to be checked before it went on the sales floor or back to a distribution center. And it ended up in an individual's pocket. Like I said, I never had any experience with those types of events, but rumors spread.
Interesting. What is your gauge on how well they're able to identify vintage?
Oh, horrible.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 horrible, yeah.
Yeah, so they have no idea
No.
on what's vintage.
Take your AOP, for example. I mean, you really think an individual working in a nonprofit is going to be able to identify the size of the lettering on the tag to be able to determine if it's a fake or not? I mean, this is an interesting market, and anything with a band name or a year, whether it's vintage or not, is going to be deemed vintage. When you have a $5 pile, they're probably going to put a 2 in front of that number first, just because they think it's old, even though it might not be.
Right. So for vintage, they have no idea of the minutia that goes on.
Absolutely not.
No. So they're more so looking for brand name, or what are they looking for?
Correct. I think what you'll notice at these organizations, at their retail locations especially, is that brand names that are usually on clearance and available for cheaper are becoming more expensive to buy used, just because they have a brand name.
Right.
And call it what you want, but it's very difficult to make operations efficient and profitable without being quick and not taking the time really needed to identify proper pricing on certain goods.
So when you say pricing guidelines, are these charts of brands? What kind of guidelines are we talking about here for the people who are pricing items to go onto the floor?
They do provide guidelines with brand names that are pretty easy to identify. That being said, if you think about something like Kid and Ace or Lululemon, a tag snipped off, a logo isn't showing up as easy as it usually does. They can get a $5 price tag instead of a 21, right? And at the end of the day, the pricer is the one making the decision. Management will come and price stuff when it's clear that it does have high value, but most of the time, whatever the pricer wants to price it as being is what is priced at.
So let's say these items come in and one of the people who's set to price it or works at one of these stores would like to buy this item. How does that work?
I'm not sure what kind of regulations from another has in place, but if an employee wants something, they have all the power, if they're not being supervised, to find a way to get it for themselves.
So the employees are not permitted to purchase items, is that correct?
Correct.
Right. While they're working.
As per most store standards. Mm-hmm. But everybody has their ways. And it's not uncommon in this industry for things to end up in the employees' hands before they reach the sales floor.
So there could be some pre-picking going on, is what you're saying.
There could be. It could be very likely that there is, yeah.
So pricer, these are individual employees?
Correct.
And when you say management, is that the management of one particular location, or is there an overarching guideline between all locations?
There is an overarching guideline. However, management on a store-to-store basis, so the sole manager of each retail location at the end of the day is making a decision.
Interesting. So you can find a Nike tee, for example, is going to be $5 at one location, but the same company could sell it at a different location and determine that the price is going to be double or triple that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Is it all up to the management depending on what kind of sell-through they're seeing on these particular items, or how are they making these decisions on their pricing guidelines?
Everyone uses Google Lens. The majority of the pricers are using Google Lens when they need questions. But, Calvin Klein's Calvin Klein.
Right.
It's hard to, obviously, you're a business owner. You can't be breathing down your employees' necks all the time and vice versa. So, if a pricer sees something and it's $2,000 a pair of Gucci shorts or something like that, and they think it's real, might as well put it for $100. Yeah, if they don't know, everyone makes mistakes.
So if one of these high price items, let's say these Gucci shorts, for example, does not sell on the floor, is it then after a certain amount of time it goes to the outlet location?
Correct, yep.
Okay. And that's just with all items?
Yep.
Yeah. After these items hit the outlets, no one buys them. Where are these items going? Like, for example, let's say the clothing.
I mean, that was all going the same place. And if you have wherever your outlet store location is, get a Happel AirTag and toss it on a big truck, the biggest truck you see, because all that stuff is just going to a rag house. And once it's at the rag house, or in the buyer's hand, in this case, the rag house, who knows? Can be going to Ghana, can be being sold as rags wholesale to supply shops, or maybe it's going somewhere else, being burned for fuel. Who knows?
Big contentious part about donation centers these days is that they are now moving to have an online store. Is the company that you worked for operating an online store?
The company that I was working for does not have an online store at the moment. Typically, with these online stores from these larger nonprofit organizations, what you'll see is a conglomerate of stores from different areas joining together in order to maximize sales online.
Okay.
So alone, as you could say one province, they might not be able to operate a store. But if or an online store, sorry. But if all the provinces were working together, or all the states, becomes a little bit easier.
So those items that they deem good enough for the online store will then get shipped to a centralized location?
Correct.
And then put onto an online store?
Correct, yeah.
And then how do they determine what goes on the website?
With your website. That's a tough one, because when you look at the websites operated by these large organizations that are live today and have been live for an extended period of time, you'll see a lot of stuff that has been listed for a long time. You'll see a lot of stuff that sold very quickly as well. But again, that comes to the individual who is responsible for posting the item on the e-commerce store's responsibility, and if that individual was able to find price comparisons mountains higher than you ever thought they'd be priced at, or they should be priced at, why not?
Right.
And some call it a crime, some call it a cash cow. It's really just how you want to, different strokes for different folks kind of thing,
I suppose. So that kind of covers pricing and stuff. Let's kind of shift over to inventories. So we talked a bit about how donations and stuff end up at stores, but how do they determine which stores get donations donated at one of their centralized locations?
Well, obviously, if a manager is letting upper management know that their inventory is low, then their demands are going to be met. If a store is empty and they need more goods, they're going to get more goods.
Okay.
That being said, if a department store that sells designer goods came and made a very large donation to a nonprofit organization, it would be in the nonprofit's best interest to find out which store is selling those types of goods regularly at a high price and send it to that store first.
Interesting. So they have some sort of like back-end knowledge on what stores are selling what at what price?
Exactly.
Interesting. So there are transfers of goods happening between locations from outlet to retail, from retail to outlet.
Probably not as much as you think, but that being said, if there is a retail location in a low-income neighborhood, it's not in their best interest to try and sell designer goods at a high price. It most likely will be sent to, again, a location that has higher numbers or is able to sell those goods at a profit or a higher profit, sorry.
So there's almost tier lists on each of their retail locations.
Something like that. I think, whichever store has highest numbers, again, really gets first pay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Let's say two locations 200 kilometers apart.
Right.
It's not in their best interest to be exchanging goods between those two stores, logistically, right? Bad idea. It would make more sense when an e-commerce store or an online store is already set up in that particular area, but they would all be going to one warehouse and it wouldn't be going back and forth.
Right.
Right. So no, more than 30 miles, something like that, Probably not. But if they're close enough, yeah, it makes sense. Why not?
So the majority of the items where they're donated is where they're being put out.
The majority of them, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from, extras that come from like a kidney foundation or like a centralized donation area.
Well, there's a for-profit organization that actually gets all the kidney foundation stuff. So.
Oh, is there? Oh.
And Diabetes Foundation.
Oh, I thought diabetes was with them too, no?
No, diabetes is bought by Savers
Really?
and the Kidney Foundation.
They operate as like a nonprofit arm?
So they buy all the bales of clothes. They buy a massive amount of inventory to claim that they support charity.
Right.
You see that disclaimer on their website. Savers is not for a charity.
Right.
But they say they support it by buying inventory for pennies on the pound.
Right, because they have agreements with Diabetes Canada, Kidney Foundation, Humane Society, stuff like that.
They could. I'm not sure of it exactly. I say yes or no, but I would assume something like that. Absolutely.
Okay. So for non-clothing items that reach the end of their life cycle within the organization, what happens to those items? Electronics, for example.
Particular electronics can be recycled, and they are bought by recyclers. So when a nonprofit organization claims that they're preventing used items from being put in a place like a landfill or a dump, that doesn't mean they're not making money in the scheme of things.
Right.
However, when you think about plastic toys that are overproduced or, there comes a point in time where it might not be profitable or efficient for the company to recycle those types of goods, and they just end up going in the garbage.
So where the items end up is particularly a money decision.
Absolute. Well, it's all a money decision. Every single item that goes through an outlet store is either being bought by another organization at the end of its life or going in the garbage.
That makes sense. We're going to pause this real quick for a little spot from our sponsors.
Discover your new grail at FromAnother.ca. Explore our curated collections of vintage, streetwear, and sneakers, available both in-store and online.
And back to the interview. So you mentioned that some employees find a way to steal the items. Is that correct?
It's one way you could phrase it. I think that, plain and simple, the answer is yes. Whether the employee themselves is taking the item, putting it in a place where maybe they can come by the next day. If you want to call that stealing, that could be one way. But if it ends up under their shirt and then they're maybe in their bag at the end of the day, that could be another method. But it was not uncommon at the organization that I worked for, at least, for many employees to steal donations.
And how did management deal with people who got caught taking items?
When they were on camera and all the evidence was there, management found a way to deal with it appropriately. But taking someone's word for it is just words. Mm-hmm. So unless an individual was caught in the act, management didn't deal with it.
So you could say that if you were smart about it, there's a very good way where you could end up with multiple items every day that you worked.
You could say that. I could say that too, but I think you said it better than me.
So we reached the end of the life cycle for clothing, goes to rag houses. What about other items? Are they sold wholesale to people?
Yes, obviously not one person, but organizations who are able to sell the products that they can buy from a nonprofit at an extremely reasonable price are obviously being bought. And it might not be in the nonprofit's best interest to share that information because they could be giving it away for free without taking a massive hit to their revenue.
Right.
But yes, something you could think like old tapes, cassettes, DVDs, all sold in massive quantities to places like flea markets. When you think about bags, purses, those types of places are going again to being bought at a low price to an individual or an organization that is selling them and making a profit.
What's some of the crazier things you've seen behind the scenes while working at these organizations?
As far as donations go, or as far as employee behavior?
I mean, employee behavior, perhaps.
I mean, every organization has its troubles dealing with internal conflict. When you are working for a nonprofit, sometimes they don't provide the best tools for management to be able to deal with internal struggles. And it can be disheartening watching employees fight behind the scenes without management getting involved, and other employees having to step in and deal with the problems when it should be management's sole responsibility. You can think of,
verbal abuse.
with something that I witnessed regularly at the organization that I was a former employee at, and the lack of support is incredible in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of these organizations like to tout that they employ people that are disadvantaged. Are they given proper support during these times?
No.
What kind of things happen?
Management just doesn't have the time of day to deal with it at the end of the day. I don't think that upper management has provided any positive direction towards a path of success for any of lower management to be able to handle what it's like working with people like you mentioned who are disadvantaged or don't have the same type of capabilities as other individuals. And it is really sad when you might see someone soil themselves, and when a leader requests support for being able to deal with an individual who soils himself, he's met with negative consequences because the organization might not want to provide him or her with the money or supplies needed to be able to handle that type of struggle.
Interesting. So money really rules everything around there.
Well, the lights are still on him here, so they know better than me.
Well, we'd like to thank our anonymous guests for providing all the insight. Hopefully they were able to answer a lot of questions for you guys. If you have any more comments or questions, make sure to leave a comment below and subscribe to the From Another YouTube channel for more great interviews like this. Thanks for watching. This is Tom Hoover of the Vintage News signing out.